So, thank you. Thank you and welcome to our panel discussion for about half an hour or a bit more. We are very good in time, but don't worry about lunch. We will end in time. So everybody who's speaking has to press button. So thank you for all the impulses you gave us this morning. And we are talking about problems, we have thoughts, we have concerns, but first of all, there's a danger in between all these discussions about problems and concerns that we lost our goals, what we initially had. So my first question to you is, what vision do you have, just free from all these concerns? What vision do you have? Because I think our common goal is for us all to make cultural heritage visible. And I would like to ask, Harriet, it's birthday time today for you, so you can have a wish. Feel free.
Well, the microphone is quite difficult to sort of press the, but so I hope I managed to press. The vision with publishing Libris data as linked data was really to reach out to the world, to be able to link to the rest of the world. And if you look at more on a national level in Sweden, it was really to be able to gather cultural heritage data. But going from a vision, and I hope we will be able to do that, of course, I mean, that is the vision, it can be quite difficult to have a vision that is working. I mean, for instance, I talked about the Wikidata volunteer, and he has been asking quite a lot of questions about the Libris vision with publishing data as linked data, because he doesn't really see the vision. And that is because he wants to have vision that's practical. For instance, we don't have a Sparkle endpoint. I didn't talk about, like Vincent talked about data.bnf, because our situation is a bit more complicated. I had planned to, but when I talked to my technical colleagues, I decided not to because it was a bit too complicated. There is so many things we need to do, and it's easy to have a vision up here, but when you should have visions that's sort of more on the practical point, it's more difficult. And so far, we had so much work. We have concentrated on the Swedish libraries that they get the data they need, and we haven't really prioritized the rest of the sort of community that wants our data.
Thank you, Harriet. Are there more visions? Who wants to ask it? Lydia, you want?
Sure. Yep. So for Wikidata itself, we go around with the tagline, giving more people more access to more knowledge. And that's what it really is about, right? We want to give more people the ability to learn about the world, be this cultural heritage or anything else. And we want to give them more access to that knowledge. That means not just having to come to Wikipedia, for example, but in your personal digital assistant or on another project's website that is using our data and so on. And more knowledge, of course, what we have today is just a tiny sliver of all the knowledge in the world that we want to collect, record, and make accessible. So we're still very far away from giving more people more access to more knowledge, but step by step.
That's all.
Yes, thank you for the question, I would say. I think that we haven't to oppose the so-called old and the so-called new. But to overcome this false opposition, I would say, in order to reinvest our traditions, professional traditions, as described in collections with rules, cataloging rules, and so on, to reinvest this tradition into the new worlds using new tools, but don't oppose new tools and old professional practices. For instance, our strength, I would say, is our collection and our data. The question is how to put our collections and our data we have, or data we are using, on the user's path in the web, using entities users are looking for, using formats such engines can understand. But by doing this, it will be a tool to overcome this false opposition, I would say. And for instance, one of the founders of the library science in France, Gabriel Naudet, he lives in the 17th century. Gabriel Naudet said that don't keep so many clever brains, so many clever bets that it's librarians. Don't keep so many clever brains in the darkness. And I think that it's the key issue for us in the current landscape and current context.
To get them out of darkness. Jürgen, I think you have a vision too.
No.
Hope so.
I don't have any more, I think. Yes. I mean, I only can agree to all these things that were said here. One important thing, I think, is that we have to pick up the user where he is, in his everyday life. And that's, I think, quite hard to achieve that, because there are really big players out there. Yeah.
Do we know our users?
It's not only one user. I think it's not one profile. There are many user groups out there, and so we need specific solutions for that. But I think we are in a competition with very big players, and that's why I think we should work together. Otherwise, it won't work. So that's my most important concern.
And what's the role of authority control in this game?
Well, as a librarian, I think authority control is really, really important. But at least in Sweden, we don't use the same authorities when it comes to other institutions. Very soon, we will use the same rules for authorities for persons for all libraries in Sweden, because to start with in Libris, it was only, research libraries, university libraries in Libris, but our aim, it's becoming a lot more public libraries are also coming into the Libris family, and our aim is that by 2020, there should be 85% of Swedish libraries in the Libris system. You could say it's a lot of words with a small thing, that you need to have the same rules for authorities when it comes to persons and organizations, and that has been difficult, but it will get better. And I hope it will get better to agree on authorities also for other institutions in the GLAM sector in Sweden. Maybe our cooperation with Wikimedia Sweden will be a way of making it easier. If the National Library can publish good quality authorities, they might be quite tempting, I think. I'm hopeful.
Lydia, I was very impressed on your statement of getting open and being right. What's your approach concerning authority control?
Right. Yeah, as I said, for Wikidata and all the Wikimedia projects, we do care about getting it right because so many people out there rely on the information we provide, right? So we have to get it right. And we don't always do, but we try very hard to. And especially for Wikidata, I think it's very important for us to have reliable sources that we can go to get the data, because we're not making the data up ourselves, right? We have to rely on trusted institutions, newspapers, authority control files, all of these to have our data and give it credibility and be able to reference it there. So for us, it's crucial.
Vincent, the French approach on this.
I don't know if there is a French approach, but I would say that, yes, authority data are not only important, but also are the key asset we have to face with challenges we have. And for instance, the IFLA documents, LOM, Library Reference Model, tells that authority data should answer to 5 user tasks: to find, to select, to obtain, to identify, to contextualize. And I think that authority data in the library world are more or less neutral, I would say. It's data for pure identification associated with identifiers. It's data associated with identifiers. And this is a key point to allow broaden reuses by many different communities far from the context of original productions by associated contextual data they need. And if authority data are reusing with more flexibility, because authority data are produced with rules, strict rules, but as it's only data for identifying persons, works, etc., and it allows many flexibility for using data and for sharing data with other communities. And I think that it can give authority data a new role, a broaden and a more broadened role in the new context.
And you mentioned IFLA models and standards. What's the role about this in this game? Are they helpful or aren't they?
I think that they could give a direction we should and the goals we should reach, but it's only goals. And IFLA models are only models, and they don't say how they could be implemented. I think that all we have discussed it this morning, and we will discuss today, later today, and tomorrow, are key points to answer or to give elements of answers to implement them.
Yes, just another question about standards, because I'm not sure. I think we have a lot of standards that had another approach. They were kind of, the setting for everything. And now if we talk about models, I think that's not difficult to understand that it's only a frame. But what about Mark 21? It's not that flexible, I think, to just interpret it as a kind of loose frame for working. And one thing we are very concerned about is the data exchange. So how can we achieve that we still have the possibility to exchange our data?
Yes, I would like to.
Thank you for your question. By seeing that data as they have as they are today, can have flexibility of reusing. I have spoken, I talk about data themselves and not working format. It's another issue. And you are right. I think that the question of remodeling data format, it's another of the key issue. How to implement entities designed by IFLA model, for instance, in France, no, in the National Library of France, and we have begun thinking about remodeling MAR format and to overcome the opposition between bibliographic and authority records and to move forward and an entity-based model. It's a very hard work, but I think it's necessary, and you are right to go out and to allow our data to be shared with others. It's necessary to think about working format.
Harriet, as a librarian, what's your opinion of using standards and models in this concern?
I'm really in favor of standards, of course. The problem is if you have different standards, and we have different standards. We could have different standards even among the library world, but definitely outside. And that is what we need to overcome. I would think that quite a lot in our standards are common, and as Jürgen talked about, we should really sort of concentrate on the shared standards and keep, you still need your standards. If you could, of course, if you don't need it, you can change it, but I think different institutions really need to have special standards because they have different uses than libraries normally have. But I still think it's important with international standards. I would like to remind you that Sweden only has 10 million inhabitants, and outside of Sweden only a few Finnish people, really Finland Swedish people speak Swedish. So, I mean, we're a small country. We need the international world.
Lydia, question to you, coming from a community who is not so much using such elaborated standards, to say it carefully. Can a community like yours can imagine to work with something like standards or models? Is much more easier, but standards?
I have so many thoughts on this. But the first thing is there's this really nice XKCD comic about, we have these 12 standards out there. They are all competing. Let's make the 13th one to unite them all. Oops, now we have 13. And it's a bit like that, I think. In Wikidata itself, I think the more standardized the rest of the world is, the easier it is for us to interoperate with it, obviously. But we also recognize that the world is complex and complicated. And especially in a project like Wikidata, you come across all kinds of weird things in the world. Because Wikipedians want to write about exactly these weird things in the world. And they're really good at finding these weird things in the world. And where your perfect model of the world doesn't fit. Just one example that I always bring is this woman who married the Eiffel Tower. You can do that.
Okay. Really?
Apparently you can do that. So she married the Eiffel Tower, and of course she has a Wikipedia article and a Wikidata item, and now you want to record this. So we have to be flexible, because otherwise we couldn't describe the world. But at the same time, this makes it very hard sometimes to reuse the data. So for us, it's always about finding a middle ground between being super easy to use and standardized and neat and tidy and actually representing the world. And as Wikidata has grown, we have made it possible for anyone to create new concepts, new entities in Wikidata, but the creation of new properties to describe those entities has been restricted. And there's a process where for 2 weeks you propose a new property, say you want to now link to a new database or so. You can propose that, and then there's a 2-week discussion period where people say, I would model this in a different way, or have you thought about this? Have you thought about how you could use it for this one as well? And after this discussion and refining, it's created, and people can use it across the whole knowledge base. But even this 2-week process, we have found again and again, doesn't make these properties perfect, right? After some time, you figure out, well, we have to change it slightly here, or we have to extend it slightly here, or we have to restrict it there. And this is okay, and that's something really valuable for us. It doesn't always make it super easy to reuse the data, unfortunately.
Okay. Jürgen, you raised the mic. Yes, please. You're here for
how many people participate in these discussions? Because I think that's quite complicated, or isn't it?
It is and it isn't. So I think there are about 20 people who can create new properties at the moment. Anyone can propose new properties, and then in the discussions, there's usually like 10 maybe, but that's just the best guess.
Okay.
Before going ahead with further questions with our keynote speakers, I would kindly invite the audience if there are visions or questions or concerns about what we just was talking about. Yes, there is. Can we please have these helpful hands with microphones? Oh, Barbara, you're perfect. Thank you. Just on your right side. We cannot hear you. Please open up the mic, press the button, and now it should.
Direkt vor den Mund halten. Okay. Okay.
Wonderful.
Okay. I will do that. So what comes to my mind when we talk about authority control is always that we probably have to separate more. I mean, probably this is a very conservative librarian kind of thing to say now, and I'm a librarian, I'm sorry. But I still think that Wikidata and like an authority file like our GND is something, it's different. Wikidata tries to collect the facts of the world, which I think is a marvelous thing, and I use Wikidata quite regularly, actually. I find it easy to use, and it's a good thing. On the other hand, it's not a reference to a resource, and what we try to do with a GND or with any other authority library-based authority file, we try to describe a resource. It's a reference model. It's not gathering the knowledge of the world. It's something we use to identify a concept, and that concept describes a resource, maybe a book or an e-book or whatever. I mean, it's just, or object in a museum. So I think when we talk about authority control, we really have to differentiate between what an authority file is and what something, a project like Wikidata is. And therefore, I think authority control means different things with regard to Wikidata and with regard to an authority file like the GND or LCSH.
Mm-hmm.
Lydia.
I think you're completely right. There is a difference. However, in terms of how these resources are used, it's very, very similar. So from the outside world, as you've seen the example of Obi, to identify, yes, this is Obi, the home improvement store, that's pretty much using it as an authority control file, right? Even if you look into the details, there are differences.
Further remarks? Just in the back.
This is not a remark to this discussion. It's a rather remark on this discussion. I would give them the preference. No one? Okay.
Sorry? Yeah, go ahead.
So this is a question perhaps for Harriet, because you were talking about shared standards. And the question, of course, is standards shared between whom? Could you elaborate a bit on what's your opinion on which set of standards we should use to share data between which institutions?
That was a bit tricky, I think. I think when it comes to authorities for persons and things like that, you should really have one authority, preferably. But when it comes to concepts and authorities for that, you can't really have the same authorities, but you would have the same concepts sometimes, and you could sort of make them shared. And that is really what has been, that's really difficult to do. I think you have done work with that, in Germany, but so far we have not really succeeded doing that in Sweden. So I'm perhaps not the best person to talk about it. Sorry.
Everybody else who would like to answer to this question? No, it's too difficult. One chance for another remark or question concerning this. Oh yeah, just outside, Baba, on your right.
Maybe a question regarding data exchange processes. We are living in a more and more distributed world, and it's great to see that more services are just established on the market, so not only in the library world, as well in the industries. Regarding that, I also appreciate very, very much that you don't charge data at Wikidata, but you said as well, you keep facts, you store them, and you keep the provenance. But considering really the practical work, how can you catch wrong information? Just simple example, someone's entering a date of birth. Of course, every institution, every service is grateful to overtake this information because they don't have it. But if one partner says this information is wrong and he really knows better, how can you ensure that other stakeholders, other services overtake this information too and don't just see it as an additional opinion?
Yeah, so data quality processes, tools, and so on around Wikidata is a huge topic, and there are many, many ways we want to tackle it, and we have been tackling it, right? And specifically, if one of our data reusers finds a mistake and wants to now say, hey, we have a mistake, everyone else should be aware of that. The first thing is they can go and fix it right away, which is the most important thing to do. There's nothing keeping people from doing that, right? That's the beauty of an open project. Anyone can make mistakes, but anyone can also fix them. But that works for individual errors here and there, right? What we will also be looking at is allowing our data reusers in a more streamlined process to tell us, okay, we found these mistakes, because they do internal checks, for example, against their own data they have or whatever magic they do internally. And then finding a streamlined process to feed that feedback back to our editors, that's something we still have to figure out. And I'm more than happy to talk to people about that, so to see how we can make that happen.
Yeah, thank you for this question. It leads me to my next question. What workflows and processes and things like this do we need to get a bit closer to our visions? Who have an idea?
I think, first of all, we need a technical environment and some agreements that we want to work together. Because it's learning by doing, I think. It's not something you construct or build a concept in an abstract manner and then implement it. So we can learn a lot from the Wikibase process, the Wikidata processes, I think. And I hope that, I mean, we talked about trust, and I hope that we can achieve both something like openness and also kind of quality control that is really practical. I mean, we all we need tools for that, and we need ideas, I think, and how we can work together in creating something like that, like a network that has both inside it openness and more kind of stable data.
Should this be a big bang or a step-by-step? Because I mentioned this morning the conference we had some years ago, first time coming together people from museums and archives and libraries, and it was such different worlds, and mostly everybody said it's impossible to work together. But we get working groups. They are small working groups with small results for special materials. But it works now. It's daily work. It's nothing special now to talk about, for example, pictures with colleagues from everywhere, from cultural institutions. So I think perhaps a step-by-step approach, or just doing, perhaps maybe a first approach. What do you think?
I would like to develop the idea of quality policy. Quality policy, it's a very important and tricky issue. It's not the question of spending 3 hours for building an authority record, but I think that it's a question of transparency and to be clear about this point. And I would say for what we established authority records and data, and what our data are for, and based on what standards they are produced, in order to allow end users to know clearly what they are supposed to reuse and what can they reuse. And it's supposed to be clear, for instance, about automatic processes. Yes, we have in national libraries automatic processes. Yes, we can reuse data produced by others, and we have to say, well, this kind of data is a provisional data you can reuse, but it's provisional data. This data is produced by other actors who can reuse it too, but it's produced by another actors. And the question is, in these quality processes, where to put the librarian's expertise in order to improve processes, in order to handle complex issues. And if we are clear about what our data are for, and would say it will be an element or an opportunity to bring elements of answers about how our data can be more easily reused.
Vincent, it's a radical approach you're talking about. I will give this to the audience. What do you think about this approach of giving up quality control versus let people know what data they are getting, where they are coming from, what they have to expect from them? Or is this too radical? Yeah, here, Anna.
To a certain point, I think we are forced to give up quality control because of millions of works being confronted with, like in the audiovisual world that I'm working in. So I think the one key point would be to maybe not give up quality control, but to give up the idea that one institution can ensure quality control, but that quality control can only be achieved in this field via exchange, data exchange with other trusted authority control communities, or to link together the other, like, what I'm thinking of is, for instance, in the audiovisual world, the identifiers of film industry, identifiers that are already out there. So to link to the trusted identifiers, to trusted data, and then to ensure that the communities that oversees quality control is much more powerful.
So it does not mean to give it completely up this quality approach, but to leave it on the institution, perhaps from where it's coming from, and it's a sort of a collaborative quality control. Some remarks there in back. There is just in the back, Barbara.
Hi, I can also agree to the stuff that has been said before, because the sheer number of data records, the sheer number of data we're working with will force us to give up to vouch for each and every data statement that we do. But maybe a learning from the Wikipedia approach, or something that we also do in our project with several millions of records, is...
what project is it?
This is a DBLP computer science bibliography. And there we try also to build an authority of authors, etc. And we know that we have data that is faulty. We just know it. And this is something that maybe we have to accept. This is maybe a state of mind you have to get into, is to accept that your data set has lots of errors, but you can label the good stuff. You can make people recognize quality. You can maybe try to bring quality to certain regions of your data, but to accept to have bad quality in other regions of your data. And if we are working with really millions of records and so on, we cannot vouch for the data set as a whole. We have to vouch for it on a record-by-record level.
So we know where the errors are coming from. That's a sort of quality. Can we go ahead? Does our workflows... oh, there was... sorry. Please.
Yeah, one question about data control. You're talking about data control. There's a lot of work to do, even in the GND. You still find 2 times Johann Wolfgang von Goethe.
Oh,
one, yeah, sure, one personal identified and without. The old stuff from the 80s are still there. So they can, it's a vintage lab, yeah.
That's
so
a vintage
in
thing, yes,
Wikidata, you even find one,
yeah.
Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. So moving between quality. And the other point is, quality is important, but not everything. Usability is also important. And so long as I have to tell the museum, go looking and search the GND number in Wikidata, so they stay at Wikidata and take maybe the GND number and the Wikidata number in their system. But if you are trying to search on the DNB portal for an authority file number, you get lost. It's a waste of time.
Okay, thank you. Last question here in the back from Lars.
Thank you. And perhaps we should also remember that in many parts of the domain we're dealing with, there is no such thing as an historical truth. Opinions keep changing, and what we record is sort of the worldview we have right now. And that in 10 years, that might look a bit different. So we shouldn't be too careful on cementing and saying, this is the correct fact about the world as it is, and will be for all foreseeable future. But we'll say, right, this is what we know right now. It might or might not be the truth.
So, question here to my colleagues. Are our workflows sufficient for an approach like this?
would say we always have more work to do. No. As we've heard from the discussion, no data set is perfect, and it's probably never going to be, but we can get closer to perfect, and to do that we need better tools and workflows and collaboration. Yeah.
Everybody thinks? Or is there a process we has to begin, perhaps, to go in this direction? Or did we start just?
We already started. I think a revolution starts today. No, no. I think it's as easy as Lydia said. We need a stepwise approach, and we have all different strengths. And I mean, there are better solutions for searching in the GND as the DNB portal currently. So that's true.
That's true.
And but I don't. I mean, we will do something for a better search. But on the other hand, I think there may be really different approaches to search in the GND, and that's not. In my opinion, there may be different solutions there, and I'm quite happy with that. So if there are more portals that use the GND or provide access to GND, we are really, really happy. That's also something, I don't know if it's interesting for you, but in Germany we have that German Digital Library, and we have Europeana all together, and I think it's also a good product to show how good authority files in a multilingual area can be, and how to interlink collections across borders. I think that's another thing we should really keep in mind and work on.
You mentioned multilingualism. Is this a topic for authority control, especially in Europe with our so many languages?
Yes, but I think it's not easy. You mentioned Europeana. I'm not really working with Europeana, but they really try to deal with it. And of course, we send data to Europeana. If we just say, I agree with quite a lot of what Jürgen and Vincent had talked about. We need to go in small steps. We need to change things. And when it comes to the multilingual, it's not easy. I don't think I have any really good solutions, but we need solutions. And we need to also accept differences, I think, because we will never get a perfect system when it comes to multilingual questions.
And Lydia, but you can.
Well, I'm not sure if we have the perfect solution, but we have one solution. So Wikibase and Wikidata has to be a multilingual project. We want to give everyone access to all human knowledge, and that only happens if we do more than just English, German, French, and a few others, right? So this is really at the core of what Wikidata is about and what Wikibase is about. But it's not always easy, right? Getting people to discuss the modeling of some concept in English, then you're at English again, right? Even if everyone can access that data in their language already. So we're maybe a bit more perfect, but yeah, there's still a lot of work to do.
It's tricky, like Harriet says. I promise to respect lunchtime, so my last question for you. What impulse will you give the audience and all our colleagues for the next 2 days? Be happy.
Enjoy discussions, I think, and I hope, we don't have GNDCon, I think, next week or in 2 weeks, So that's the only GNDCon we have in mind currently. So I hope we have rich discussions, and for us it's very important because it's all about motivation for really tricky things to waiting to be solved, and so we need your impulses. That's all.
Other recommendations, Vincent?
I think that we have to share also what we want to do and how we can imagine to reach the same goals. And because we have the same goals in France and Germany and Sweden, maybe we have different national landscape, and we have to take it into account. So we may have some tactical difference, I would say, but I think that the strategical goal is the same. So, and when there is a will, there is a path, so we can reach it, I think.
Other recommendations for our colleagues?
I would say have fun. I will, because I really want to hear a lot of what you are thinking. So I hope you will speak in simple German, so I will understand.
Lydia,
Yeah, definitely have fun. Every one of us brings some piece of the puzzle to the table. Every one of us needs each other and can help each other. Let's figure out how to do it.
So that's as well my recommendation. Have fun. Use the time being. And I thank very much everybody here, my colleagues on stage and you in the audience.